With all the new rumors and excitement over the upcoming iPhone 12 event, which was just like announced today, I think it's time to delve into the shadows of the past. And by shadows of the past, I mean like a year ago. And with the way this year has been going, it actually feels like I bought the iPhone 11 in a totally different like time and place. Whew. But I've been using the iPhone 11 non-Pro as my daily driver for most of this time, even though the SE is now my phone for when I leave the house. But when I'm in the house and for the past year, I've used this as my phone. So how has it held up after a year? Is the iPhone 11 still worth buying with the 12 so close on the horizon? Let's find out. I'm afraid to see if I just broke that. What's up, everyone? I'm the Everyday Dad, and if I can figure it out, you can figure it out. Should come as no surprise, but I really like the iPhone 11. Before Face ID took a hit with all of the current restrictions, this was easily, and is, if I only think about Face ID, this is my favorite phone of all time. Now, in my life, I've used all sorts of different phones. I've used the original Motorola Droid, I used an HTC Evo, and I even used a few of the Galaxy Notes. I used a few of the beginning Galaxy Notes. And after my switch over to the Apple side, this is just the best. Of all those phones, this is the best. So keeping in line with the rest of my X time later videos, we will not be delving too far into specs or every single feature that this phone has, as it's been out for a year. And if you have something specific that you want to see, I guarantee you, I would place money down right now that there is a whole video. There's a 20-minute video out there for you on whatever niche part of this phone that you want to see. Today we're going to do a quick overview just in case you don't know anything about the iPhone 11, which is probably pretty tough, but there are probably some folks out there. Then we'll get into the things that I really like and the things that I don't like so much about this fantastic piece of hardware that, let's check, did we break it on the opening? We did not break it. This case is amazing. This is just like the cheaper rubber case, and I didn't think it was gonna protect it very well, but you just saw it. First off, the iPhone 11 is on the lower end side of the current iPhone lineup, meaning it gets to be a little bit more fun. This phone gets to have a little bit more fun because it's not as professional. What I mean by that is you get a wider variety of colors to choose from, with my preference going to the product red version. It looks amazing. I love how the product red phones look. I always try to get the product red phone. Except for the SE, I went with the white. It looks good. Product red's the best. You can also choose to get this with different price and storage options, starting at $699 for the 64GB version, and you can go all the way up to a max of $849 for the 256GB version. And these are the Apple prices on the Apple website. I'm sure you could find it cheaper on a wireless carrier's website or even like Amazon from time to time, so keep an eye out. Maybe you can find it cheaper than that. The main part of the phone that you'll see is a 6.1-inch liquid retina display that I still think looks amazing. I use, for comparison, as a video editor that makes all these YouTube videos, I use other high quality displays all the time. My iPad Pro to my ultra-wide LG monitor. I use amazing displays, and this phone looks amazing. This phone ranks up there with one of the best displays I've ever seen. Sure, it's not in 120 hertz, but you know who cares about that? Literally nobody. Nobody cares about 120 hertz. Under the hood, you'll get the current, and I stress this, you'll get the current as of today, the releasing of this video, the current flagship processor, the A13 Bionic, with the 3rd generation neural engine. That's just a gee whiz piece of information, if you were curious. 3rd generation neural engine. You're welcome. Quickly in specs, let's talk the camera with the rear camera array having a dual 12 megapixel ultra wide and wide angle camera option. Now this ultra wide will give you an impressive 120 degree field of view, which is one of my favorite things about this, but we'll talk more about that later. For video on these cameras, you can do 4K and up to 60 frames per second and 1080p and up to 240 frames per second. For legit slow motion. The only other camera that I own that can do that is a $3,500 full frame camera that just came out. The front facing camera actually also has a wide angle mode. And honestly, I know this is gonna sound cringy, as I'm in my late 30s, I'm a guy that runs a YouTube channel, but I bought this camera for the wide angle selfies because running a social media enterprise requires a lot of cool ultra wide selfies. Or it used to, before I was stuck in my house all the time. So we haven't done as many recently, but I would like, as restrictions, as I'm allowed to go out more and start getting into more exploration outside, I will start doing more ultra wide selfies. And they're fantastic, but we will talk much more about that camera in a little bit. Okay, the spec overview is complete, and thankfully we didn't fall asleep at the desk right now talking about them, because specs can be kind of boring sometimes. The last few of these X time later videos, we talk about the things that we like first, and today we're gonna change it up. So let's start off with the things that I don't like at the top of the video. And by top of the video, I mean, we're at 7 minutes of recording, so top-ish of the video. The first and only real major downbreaker I have with the iPhone 11, there is no version of Touch ID. And this should not surprise anybody because I say this an awful lot. Face ID by itself was made for a world that just doesn't exist anymore, at least here in the US. And if I'm out with the phone, it's just a hassle waiting for Face ID to decide it doesn't recognize my face. And it needs to switch over to PIN entry. Now this sounds like a small issue. Gary, come on, man, you're complaining about this? It takes like 2 seconds for that to work. But when you are used to the phone seamlessly working in like all other ways, this is a pretty rough grain of friction, and this stands out more than if the phone were riddled with problems. Something I've noticed in not just technology, but in life in general, the better a device, piece of software, team is, the more irritating small problems are to the overall experience, whether it is a physical product or that Gary on the team doesn't pull his own weight. That is a bigger frustration when the team is better. The better the team is, the more frustrating Gary is that he's not doing his job. Yes, they have released updates to make the transition to PIN faster, and I don't blame Apple because nobody could have predicted the major issue that Face ID would come up against. I just wish we'd get Touch ID and Face ID on all devices moving forward. I really like the solution they have on the iPad Air 4 where the on and off button has the ID. I wish that would come to the iPhones. The next thing I don't like is probably the battery life. And that's not to say the battery life is bad, and I haven't had a problem in the past few months as I've been working in my basement next to a trove of electronic chargers of every shape, size, color, and variety. But my definition for good battery life is having enough that I can comfortably get through 1 full day of use. Because like I said in the Apple Watch video, I charge all of my devices at the end of the day anyway. I don't need it to last 3-4 days, whatever, on one charge. Much like the iPhone SE, this does have just enough to get me through 1 day in the office or 1 weekend day with the family, but it's real close. And it did get close enough to prior to working from home. When I was traveling for work last year, if you remember, I was out of the office for like 4 months. I did buy the battery case to give me a little more juice, and it did. When I have this in the battery case, it comfortably gets me through an entire day and then some. But I don't use it anymore. You'll notice it's not on here right now because the case was big and it was bulky, and it was so big and bulky that it changed the experience of this light and nimble phone. It changed it so much so that I just stopped using it. And honestly, I wanted to bring it here so I could show you, but I have no idea where it currently is in my house. It's lost in one of these boxes of random technology because I just don't use it anymore. It's a great idea. It's a great idea, but I don't like that it takes this small, powerful phone and it makes it big and bulky. When it comes right down to it, those are my 2 biggest gripes about this phone. You'll notice, one thing you'll notice I didn't complain about was the notch on top. You forget that this is here. I know I'm gonna catch flack for this. I think this is actually a really neat way to separate the top information on the screen and functionality of the phone. Swiping down on different sides of the notch will actually, can you see that? It'll give you different options and different pieces of information depending on which side you swipe on. And I think that's a pretty neat way to work around hardware limitations. So I guess we've seamlessly transitioned into the things I like. And I'll count that notch separation is like 0.5 of a positive. It's not good enough for a whole thing on its own, but it's good enough for the mention. Notch differentiation, 0.5. The next thing that I really like on the iPhone 11, and it's the killer app for me, and this is what I said in the beginning, I bought the phone in the first place to replace my XR because it had the ultra wide angle camera on both the front and the back of the device. It's not too strong a word for me to say that I love the cameras on this phone. This camera is the one that I use most often in my life, and I know that sounds strange. I know that sounds strange coming from a person that has like 3 cameras wrapped around them right now with 2 more in the office over there. I've spent way too much money on video production equipment for this side hustle of a YouTube channel of mine, but this is the one that I use more often than any of these. Probably not all put together, but separately it's the one that I use this the most because I use this phone as my family camera, my social media camera, my like, oh crap, I missed a shot that I need for today's video and we gotta do it really quick, so let's take it really quickly and then upload it. That's this kind of camera. I use this for everything. I would be saddest if I lost this as a camera. This is the best and easiest to use thing I've ever come across. The images look so good coming from such a small censored device. This has roughly the same sensor size as an action camera. And while action cameras generally look muddy, they look washed out, and they have terrible skin tones. The iPhone 11 doesn't do any of that. It looks fantastic. It's got all sorts of modes on it. It's got a nighttime mode. It's got a portrait mode. You can take really good photos in low light conditions if that's your thing. It's also got great video with smart HDR technology that will let you get levels of dynamic range that only the highest quality cinema cameras can really touch. There are even pro level apps that you can buy that will enhance the manual control you have over this camera. If you really want to dial in shutter speed, ISO, if you really want to manage your exposure triangle, you can do that too. This is amazing. This is amazing. I love talking about this, and I recommend these as beginner cameras because I can't even say this is the future. This is the present of cameras. If you don't pay attention to the camera industry too much, you might not have noticed the entry-level point-and-shoot market died about 5 years ago, thanks to these kind of advancements in cell phones. I'll try not to gush about this too long. I could talk about this. I could gush about this for hours. This camera is amazing, and this could be your only photo video camera if you don't have to worry about shooting in studios or you don't have clients that are paying for your work. There are benefits to having a larger sensored camera, but if you don't have a specific need for it, this is just good. This is good. How long have we been gushing about this? We've been gushing about this a while because it's amazing. As amazing as this is though, it's not the only thing I like about the phone. I also really like the power of the A13 Bionic chip. If you're not a tech nerd and you don't look into processors, you might be shocked to know that the A13 compares very closely to like last generation laptop processors. When I talk to like my friends that aren't big into tech, they're always surprised that phones like this has a 6-core, 2.6 gigahertz processor inside of it with a 4-core GPU. That's better than the MacBook Pro 13. Sure, much like large sensored cameras, it's not an exact one-for-one comparison between a laptop and a phone. There are obviously advantages to having an actual computer, but that's not to say that this is not powerful. These phones and the tablets with the same processors are crazy powerful, and this is built off of an even more advanced 7nm architecture than Intel's current laptops. Now, I haven't specifically done too much video editing or tough tasks on the iPhone 11, but I have done so with the iPhone SE from 2020, which shares that A13 processor. And if you haven't seen my video where I go through editing on the iPhone, that shocked me at how powerful these phones are. I was able to do a full 4K video edit with a Bluetooth mouse and a Bluetooth keyboard with that SE from 2020. And it also, when we rendered the video, it rendered faster than some budget like actual computers. This is a legit powerhouse. This is a legit powerhouse, and if you're not impressed by this, I don't know what else to impress you with. This does bring up another thing that I have liked about the iPhone 11 over the past year. I really like the accessory support. With all of the new features that iOS 13 and 14 have given us, I mean, you just heard me talk about a Bluetooth mouse and a Bluetooth keyboard onto your phone. You don't need any additional software. You don't have to pay for that support. It's just there. I even had a monitor hooked up through an HDMI dongle. I wouldn't personally use this setup as my only computer, but in a pinch, with a few key accessories, you could turn this little phone into a legit productivity monster. Like, you could do a whole studio setup just around this. Man, if it had USB-C. Man, if it had USB-C. But even without USB-C, you can easily do all manner of word processing, emails, content consumption, basically everything an iPad can do, just smaller. And you probably already have one, so you don't have to go out and then factor in another iPad. You already have this in your pocket. Besides all of that, there's also a whole range of case options out there. Some of those cases have additional like lens mounting options that can make the camera even better. You can get ND filter, diffusers, wide angle adapters if you want like super ultra wide angle, and even anamorphic adapters if you're one of those people that love movies and you love lens flares, you can get that on here. This is a blank canvas that you can build a whole system around. And last but certainly not least, in the headlining things about the iPhone 11 that I've enjoyed, can you guess what I'm about to say? We haven't said it yet, and you might have guessed it. Believe me, I didn't forget. The Apple ecosystem. Boom. It's the center bingo spot. You can't go video without talking about the Apple ecosystem. I really like that my phone, the single device that I've got with me all the time, much to the irritation of my wife, this works so well with all of my other technology. I can start a conversation on one and move it to the next as needed. I can do all of my scheduling, all of my work on my iPad, and have it instantly available and reflected on my phone. It's just nice to have things work so well natively and not need to search out a third-party solution to do that work for me. And you could do that here if you wanted to, but I like the native Apple apps so much that I never do. It all works together without having to mess with it, so why mess with it? But at the end of the day, so what, right? Should you buy the iPhone 11 with the hint of the new phones on the horizon? As you just heard me talk about for the last 15 minutes, I still think this is a phenomenal phone that will continue to get updates and be relevant for years to come. However, if you are in the market for a new phone, I did say that next week there will be some kind of Apple event that will probably have an iPhone 12 announcement. So I would wait for that to pass to see if any earth-shattering changes come out from Cupertino in the next few weeks before buying an iPhone 11. However, if you need a phone right now and you can't wait a couple weeks, absolutely get the iPhone 11. I love this thing. I love it. I love it. It does everything that I want it to do and more so. Everything about it works great. The camera will still be amazing if you buy this. The power will still be amazing if you buy this. The price will still be right if you buy this. I do highly recommend this. Just if you have the ability to wait, maybe wait till next week. And if you watch this video and you're curious, you want to get into the Apple ecosystem, but you're like, Gary, it's too expensive. No, not necessarily. It's not necessarily that all expensive. And if you'd like to see a video on the cheapest Apple ecosystem you can get, here's a video that I made for you specifically, just you, right here. Click on it to watch. Click, 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 click. Thanks for watching.